All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating first person account coming out of Washington state. It's a story that kicks off with a weird light in the sky and spirals into a mystery that stretches over years. But it all comes down to one absolutely terrifying night out in the woods. So, picture this. You're out on a normal camping trip. Everything's quiet, and then suddenly, your dogs just go nuts. That peaceful sound of the forest is completely shattered by their frantic barking, but then it just stops. Total silence. And that question, well, that's what this whole thing is about, isn't it? We're going to break down what happened that night, piece by piece, and try to figure out what in the world could have gone down in those deep woods of the Pacific Northwest. Okay, let's dive in. First, we need to set the scene. Our story starts on a farm near the famous Beacon Rock in Washington. Now, this isn't the main event, but trust me, it's a super important starting point for our timeline. I mean, can you imagine seeing that? You're 11 years old, you look up at what you think is just the full moon, but then it starts doing something impossible. It gets bigger, and then just slides sideways across the tops of the trees. He bolts inside to get his brother, but by the time they get back out, poof, it's gone. A total you-had-to-be-there moment, and the perfect setup for what comes next. So let's jump ahead just 1 week. The narrator, who's a kid that grew up in these woods and was totally comfortable out there, decides to go on a solo camping trip on his family's property. And this is where the story gets really, really strange. You have to pay close attention to this sequence. It starts as a totally normal evening. Then, the animals start reacting to something he can't see, just going crazy. And then, blank. His memory literally jumps from the sound of barking dogs straight to the dead quiet of the next morning. It's like a huge chunk of the night was just snipped out. Yeah, this quote just throws you right into that moment of pure confusion. He wakes up, the fire is stone cold, and one of his dogs is just gone. And this wasn't just any dog. He said this dog never left his side. You can feel that immediate sense that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. And the scene he wakes up to is just a mess of wrong details. He'd been sick. His boots are on the wrong feet. His socks are soaked even though it hadn't rained. But the worst part? These woods, a place he knew like the back of his hand, suddenly felt completely alien and scary. And here's the kicker. This is the part that proves it wasn't just a bad dream or a weird memory. It's confirmed. Back at the farmhouse, his family knew something was up when his coon hound showed up all by itself around 11 p.m., just howling. That means he was out there, unaccounted for hours. But wait, the story doesn't stop there. A few days later, he makes a discovery that connects this whole terrifying night to another mystery, one from even earlier in his childhood. He finds these two little red puncture marks on his ankle. They're really distinct. And his mind just instantly snaps back to that night in the woods and the missing time. But the real shock was realizing he'd seen marks exactly like these before. And this is maybe the wildest part of the whole story. The marks weren't a one-time thing. An identical pair had shown up on his other ankle years before, when he was just 5 or 6 after this bizarre sleepwalking incident where his parents found him outside by the mailbox in the middle of the night. It's a repeating pattern. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because as absolutely strange as this all sounds, this story doesn't exist in a vacuum. It actually connects to a much, much larger pattern of accounts just like it. And when you lay out the timeline like this, it just clicks. You can see the pattern so clearly. It starts with that weird event when he was a little kid, then it ramps up with the light in the sky, hits a peak with the missing time incident, and then you have the physical evidence, those marks showing up again. Each event builds on the last. So the core of this whole thing is missing time. It's a term you've probably heard before if you follow this stuff. It's that classic, terrifying feature of these kinds of encounters. A period where your consciousness just goes blank, but all the evidence tells you something definitely happened. Now, this is where it gets really compelling. The different parts of this one kid's story sound an awful lot like some of the most famous cases out there. The symmetrical marks? That should ring a bell for anyone who knows the Betty and Barney Hill case. The whole camping trip setting, so similar to the Allagash Fort incident. And the upset animals and the confusion afterward, that's textbook for these kinds of reports. So what's the deal with those marks? Well, in abduction research, these kinds of symmetrical puncture wounds show up again and again all over the world.
They're often interpreted as evidence of some kind of procedure, like someone was taking biological samples or maybe even inserting an implant.
All right, last piece of the puzzle, the location. We have to look at where this all went down, because Beacon Rock is in the Columbia River Gorge. And that area, well, it's not just any patch of woods. It's got a history.
And check this out. The timing is just perfectly creepy. His experiences happened smack in the middle of a huge, well-documented cluster of sightings that people now call the Columbia River Gorge UFO wave.
Yeah, for years, that whole region was just buzzing. People were seeing glowing orbs, getting weird radar hits. All kinds of strange stuff was being reported to groups like MUFON. The area has these big power and nuclear facilities, so it's always been a hotbed for this kind of phenomena. And this is what ties it all together so neatly. Remember that very first thing he saw? That light that looked like the moon but moved sideways? Well, guess what other people were reporting? Independently in the very same county, during the exact same time frame? The exact same thing. He wasn't the only one seeing it.
So when you put it all together, the personal story, the eerie parallels to classic cases, and the fact that it all happened in a known hotspot during a documented UFO wave, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is this just one person's strange, isolated memory? Or is it one more piece of a much bigger, much stranger puzzle?